Welcome into the Hot Read podcast for Wednesday, June the 19th. I'm your host. Man, has June flown by? I just did a double take at my own computer screen. The fact that we are already 2/3 of the way through June. I'm your host, Eastn, director of published content here at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. We're also brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network. And I am joined much further into June than I thought we were by producer JT, who you can follow on social media at JT_Ruhnke. JT, is June flying by for you as well?
Yeah, man. I mean, with myself moving in Nashville, moving from place to place, and with, not a lot going on right now with
the new
the
park
NFL
bench
world.
to set up camp at?
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
awesome.
I mean,
Congrats, man.
Thanks. It does feel like it's kind of flown by, isn't it? But D-Good does point out that it is, D-Good, this is a live show. It is on the 18th.
This is the show for the
tomorrow.
19th. We're recording on the 18th.
For the 19th.
I know you're not new here, D-Good. What are you doing? Get it together.
But it's good. The vibes are very high today. The chat is popping off before the show. Maybe as a testament to you being on time, 2 shows in a row.
2 shows.
Can we get a round of applause?
Up is down, wrong is right. The sky is purple.
Yeah.
Yes. It's the end of days. Something clearly is wrong. We are here 2 days in a row, 2 episodes in a row, on time. Look at me. If I do it 3 times in a row, we might just maybe be the last episode of the show. We just call it there, end on a 3-peat and go home with our turkey. Duck Falling in the chat says that I found out recently that Eastn is only 24. First of all, Duck, when and how? Like when? I don't remember. Did we bring this up on the last episode that I'm 24 years old? How did you find that out? I don't care that you know that, but I'm curious where that came up. He said he may not have been allowed to see the Music City Miracle. He never got to see Steve, Frank, and Eddie play. I need a moment. I was alive for the Music City Miracle. I was 1, 2 years old. My dad was there.
Did you say your first word before the Music City Miracle or after, do you think?
I'll have to check my sources on that. I do not know if that is the case or not. No, he's right. I mean, I have been alive for the entirety of the Tennessee Titans tenure in Tennessee. That's alliterative. But I have not been alive in the sense that I've watched all of it. Although Duck does follow it up. Right. He takes the words right out of my mouth here. Is that in my formative years, 10 from 10 years old to 15 years old as a football fan, where you really kind of settle in, 8 to 15, somewhere in there.
You lock
08 to 2015 Tennessee Titans. I think there were like 7 total wins in those 7 years. It was not a lot of good football. There was one awesome, they would go 13-3 one year, the CJ2K year. That was really by far the high point because there was nothing else even remotely. And I'm not sure there was another winning season besides that one Kerry Collins pop-off year. And then, of course, it ends with a whimper when they get lost at home, a playoff game that I was in attendance for by the Ravens. Tough scene. But yeah, I am young, and Ethan, he says he's a 26-year-old fan. He can relate to this. None of this has to do with what today's episode is. Today, we're going to go through the AFC South. If you're wondering, hey, what are we going to talk about today? Are they just going to read the chat again like they did last time? No, we have thoughts. We have prepared things for you on today's show. I have notes and everything. We are going through the AFC South offenses, position group by position group. And as JT with our lovely graphics here shows you, if you're watching with us live on YouTube, you will see that we are ranking the AFC South offenses by position group. Going to get into some debating, some discussing today. I'd imagine, JT, I've not seen your list. You have not seen mine. We have done these independent of one another. And I'd imagine we have some disagreements. I hope so, because this show might be 20 minutes long and super boring if we agree on everything. So hopefully we disagree. We can get into it a little bit. Hopefully those of you tuned in with us live today can participate. We'd love to hear your thoughts, whether or not you disagree, why or why not. Give us your thoughts in the chat. You can do that by going on over to YouTube, finding Broadway Sports Media's YouTube page, and there you will find the live stream. This live stream, you'll find a version on the Broadway Sports Media YouTube page. Join the comment section of that YouTube live stream, and you can join Ethan and D-Good and Duck Falling and Stony, Kenneth, all of these guys already here with us in the chat. We want to hear from you guys today. Typically speaking, JT, I was like just perusing our numbers. It's the offseason. You get to do some housekeeping. Catching up on some things from a logistical standpoint here on the Hot Read podcast. And, we're prepping ourselves for June and July, despite June going by fast. And Lord knows I am not complaining because June is, historically speaking, in the 3+ years of the Hot Read podcast. And I'd imagine just all of sports media, the slowest month, the lowest viewership. There is the least amount of football to talk about. So we have to get creative. We have to break the glass, break glass in case of emergency topics. We store up a squirrel that's nuts for the winter. In this case, it's the dead of summer. We break those out, and we're going to get into those starting today and on Thursday with the offense and defenses in the AFC South. Got some guests hopefully coming up between now and training camp. It was announced, by the way, Titans will open training camp exactly 5 weeks from today, Tuesday, June the 18th. So they will be, what is that? July the 23rd. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Yeah. July the 23rd, that Tuesday, 5 weeks from today, Titans vets and rookies will report. I'd imagine that won't be a day for media because it's the first day, but that week will be when media gets their first crack at it. And you'll see a pretty strong mix of JT or I at media. At least one of us will be covering all things training camp. I'm going to have a kid somewhere in there. And when that happens, I will be in person, much less. JT will be valiantly pinch hitting, and we will get our coverage of it one way or another. And the show will continue as regularly scheduled, with or without a child. There may be screaming in the background. You're going to have to deal with it. But we will talk Titans throughout training camp. Don't you worry. But today,
just adding basically another co-host, right? Like it's just, they're going to have reaction as well.
We're working on a third box for the 100%.
Baby cam.
Baby cam, where there's just in the corner. There's a sleep baby at all times.
Live baby
absolutely.
reaction.
I'm not going to dox my newborn child. That's a terrible idea. Okay. So, and by the way, before we get into this, if you guys are listening with us live, we appreciate you being here. Help us out by retweeting, liking, if you're on Twitter or on Facebook. And then if you're on YouTube, which is where we prefer you to be, so you can see our gorgeous faces. Do us a favor, hit subscribe if you're not already. We're continuing throughout June and July. We're cranking out the content. We're going to have videos and shorts and live streams, at least one every single day, all summer long, all year long. The content does not stop here on the Hot Read podcast and on Broadway Sports Media's YouTube page. So hit subscribe and hit like on those things for us. We appreciate you doing so. JT, let's start. And again, I have today's episode could be 25 minutes long. It could be an hour long. Knowing us, probably on the longer side, but it's all going to depend on what our lists look like. I think quarterback is the reasonable place for us to begin. So let's start with the quarterback position. And I'd imagine ranking, the Texans, the Jaguars, the Titans, and the Colts. We agree on who has the best quarterback situation. Do we both have Houston as the number one quarterback team in the AFC South? Can we agree on that?
So
okay.
I did in fact have the Texans number one,
right,
with CJ Stroud, and I think that with that, it's an interesting debate to have. Like, you could make a case for like a Trevor Lawrence, but then again, I think what made me ultimately, despite only having one season under his belt, make CJ Stroud the number one quarterback in the AFC South is that he put up a top 5 quarterback year when Trevor has never done that in his 3 or 4 seasons.
He showed a higher capacity for ceiling than Trevor ever has, I think, is Correct. A fair way of putting it.
And right? I think that's
the best of CJ so far is already better than the best we've seen of Trevor.
Correct. And I think that's ultimately how I landed with CJ Stroud as
King Jerry in the chat says, you could not, in fact, make a case for Trevor Lawrence. We're going to make a strong Trevor Lawrence case in general here in a minute. But
that's what I heard. I mean, I'm kind of there with King Jerry. But as you know, in the Titans local media space, you do have a little bit of a soft place in your heart for Trevor Lawrence.
It's not a soft place in my heart. I have an objective pair of eyes. Okay. And a big brain up here that allows me to see that clearly Trevor Lawrence is a good quarterback deserving of the contract he just got. And people are wrong about the idea that he is a mediocre quarterback in the league. That's not true. We're going to get into that in a minute. That kind of gives away the ghost though on my, so let me just give you my list and then you can share your list and we'll compare and contrast. So obviously Houston number one. And by the way, I don't know, we didn't talk about what the criteria for this is. I went, because you could look at it as who is the best historically, who is the best going into this year, or you could theoretically say, okay, who's the best for the foreseeable future? Who's best set up for the future, taking into consideration depth and age and all of those things. For me, and I'm curious how you approached it, JT. For me, I just went, who is the best situated for this year, 2024, going into the year of this season alone, who is in the best shape? Is that kind of how you took it as well?
Yeah, I mean, that's two different arguments for sure. I think you put CJ at the top just because of the potential that he can once again be a top 5 quarterback. But then I guess you bring up an interesting point that you do have to kind of factor into these rankings. you kind of mentioned the depth. So I started as literally right here, I'm thinking, should I put a Mac Jones or Mason Rudolph into account here?
Well, it's funny
But
you
I
say
feel
that. I
like
literally have two different lists for quarterback. I have a backup ranking and a starter ranking.
I was gonna say I didn't know if I wanted to bring, like, if we were gonna bring this up. I would totally do a backup quarterback ranking as well. But I think for this list, it's the only kind of position list here out of these like 5 that I think it
Yes.
really is just ranking one person. But if we
Well,
want to get into
what's the famous
backup,
quote out of Peyton era? And I should know this because it's like a staple in sports media. Peyton Manning era Colts. One of their coaches famously said, "If Peyton goes down, we are effed, and we don't practice effed." Right? Like that's kind of the idea with these quarterbacks. Now, the Colts last year, for example, a good indicator of sometimes if you've got a really good backup, you can still be a playoff caliber, playoff fringe team, and so like that is a part of it, and But like you said, with the running backs and the wide receivers and the tight ends, all of those positions, we're going to get into like the depth as a part of it. With the quarterback, not so much. So my list for starting quarterbacks is Houston number 1, then Jacksonville, then Tennessee, then Indianapolis. So I have Stroud, Trevor, Levis, Richardson heading into 2024. What is your list? And then we can decide where we want to go.
You can just repeat yourself because that's also my list as well. This was probably the easiest one for me. There isn't a lot to be said because I think there's only really an option to compare two of these guys, right? Trevor Lawrence.
I'm surprised you all the blustering from you on Trevor Lawrence. Oh, is he really that good? That big old contract, and you still have him number 2.
But I mean, yes, but I think it's because he's played 4 seasons versus Will Levis, who was played 8.1% of a game or something like that, like he's played 8 games, and then Anthony Richardson has played 4. Like I just don't think that they can be in a conversation. Now, I think the most interesting part is how close a CJ Stroud in the chat.
I hope Stoney doesn't believe this. He has Stroud, Levis, Richardson, Lawrence. Okay, can I just give you my vendetta on Trevor Lawrence?
Sure, but I was going to say, like,
and I'll let you finish,
discussion as Lawrence too. I think it's a question of how close is he to maybe a CJ Stroud, and that's where I just don't think that he is. I also don't think that, like you said he's very deserving of that contract. There's no reality for me where Trevor Lawrence getting a tying amount for kind of the APY per year, the AAV every year being tied with Joe Burrow at 55. There's no reality where I think Trevor Lawrence is that good of a quarterback to be deserving of that. And so when you talk about it, like Trevor Lawrence,
I look at it in a different way because you're saying I don't think Trevor is worth that. And in my mind, I say I think Trevor is worth that. And I think Joe is being underpaid. So do you get what I'm saying? Like, I think it's a matter of timing in the market and just we know this, like, nobody, just even the most vehement detractors for the Trevor Lawrence contract are still saying on the radio, I can't believe. Well, no, I understand why. I understood why they had to do it, but I think this is going to age poorly. Like it's always parsed with, well, obviously you have to based on just the way that these things work. So like that's a part of it, but like you compare him to Mahomes, you compare him to Burrow. I don't think the argument is Trevor does not deserve that much money. I think the argument should be those guys are like those teams, the Chiefs and the Bengals, for example, they are getting a deal on their quarterback right now, which is really two sides of the same coin, right? I mean,
that's fair, but I mean, you're going to have to do a lot to, kind of convince this chat. Otherwise, as D Good says, I would put Trevor Lawrence behind Mason Rudolph.
It's going to get worse the longer we go.
I think you should let's rip the Band-Aid off and let's dive into it because you've always been the guy who's going to make the case for Trevor. So make it.
So let's look at Trevor's last 2 seasons. I heard this. I wish it. I don't know if I can't remember where I got this. I was listening to some show and they brought this up and I furiously started writing things down because I'm like, these are the numbers I need in order to make this case because I knew we were going to do this episode eventually this summer. Look at the last 2 seasons for Trevor, right? Record 17-16, 13th in the NFL ranking for quarterbacks over. And again, record wins, not a quarterback stat, neither here nor there. But minimum 20 starts over the last 2 years for every quarterback. He is 13th in the league at 17-16. Completion percentage 65.9, 11th. Passing yards per game 246, 11th. Yards per pass 7.1, 14th. Touchdown to interception ratio 46-22, 15th in the league. And then passer rating 91.9, 14th in the league. So those league rankings last 2 years, 13th, 11th, 11th, 14th, 15th, 14th. Very, just middle of the road, slightly above average quarterback, slightly. That is the last 2 seasons in totality. Now, the reason why I'm saying the last 2 seasons and not his first 3 seasons, right, is because I don't even the largest Trevor Lawrence detractors are still willing to throw out the Urban Meyer, whatever that was, right? That's not arguably the worst situation for a rookie quarterback to start his career in coaching wise that we can remember. Like it was that bad. So we throw that out. And that's a part of the argument where it's like, how much did that stunt his growth? We saw, and those of us that are Trevor Lawrence believers point to the back half of 2022, 2 seasons ago, as the light bulb moment for him, right? That's that back half of the season from week 9 through 18 was when he really started to turn it on. His trajectory, both statistically and just the eye test, it felt like he finally figured it out and was becoming that guy, to the point where coming into 2023, it was like, this could be the year. Huge breakout for Trevor Lawrence. Watch out. And then last year started stronger than I think a lot of folks remember it, because of the way that in 2 years now in a row, they've they have collapsed in the back half of the season. It has fallen apart as you've gone. We remember that back half and the objective hilarity of that, and forget that they started pretty strongly. So I think another thing, here's the crux of my argument, JT, and I'm about to saw that 2-year sample size off on either end to give you what I think is the true look at what Trevor Lawrence's potential is. The reason why I think you saw the front half of 2022 off is the reason that I just explained, right? Coming out of 2021, the Urban Meyer experiment, it took a while for him. That first half of 2022, it took a while. It took to like week 9-ish for him to figure it out. And then this past season, when you go back and you look at the injuries that he sustained 3 consecutive injuries around week 13 last season that completely threw off his ability to play. And if you go like watch the tape, go rewatch the games or grind all 22, you'll see this guy is physically hampered. But on December 4th, this is week 13 against the Bengals, had a high ankle sprain, grade 3 high ankle sprain that he played through the next week to try to, I remember at the time people were discounting the decision by the coaches to play him, because it was like, are they just because he was trying to break a consecutive start streak. It's like, maybe you should play, maybe you shouldn't. He looked bad in week 14. Then on December 17th, just a couple weeks later, he had a grade 1 concussion in week 15 against the Ravens. And then the following week, on the 24th of December, he had a shoulder AC joint sprain. So those 3 injuries really derailed what was already kind of a falling off the rails season for the Jaguars. Their quarterback was physically falling apart at the end of last season, as did their record. So let's cut off the front half of 2022 and the back half of 2023 and look at that 1.5-ish season span between week 9 of 2022 and week 13 of 2023. In that 23 game span, he is 16-7, completion percentage of 67%, 272 yards per game, 7.3 yards per pass, 40-14 touchdown to interception ratio, and almost a 96 passer rating. Now, of those 7 losses, 16-7 as a record in those 23 games, 3 of them were to the Chiefs. This is including the playoffs, by the way. 3 of those losses were the Chiefs. I don't know about you, but generally speaking, most teams in the NFL, when we're looking at records, you're like, well, okay, there's a loss there, but it was the Chiefs. People tend to lose to the Chiefs. That happens. So when you look at that, when he was not hampered by, on the front end, the worst starting situation of any starting quarterback in recent memory, and on the back end, a team that was collapsing again, because there's a lot of reasons why this team has problems, and he's dealing with 3 significant injuries all in a row within a month at the end of last season, I think you see what is a very, very good quarterback that is in a fine situation, not the best. I think there's some things that could be improved around him for sure. But I think he's an elevator there. When you look at that sample size, 16-7, almost 68% completion percentage, 270 plus yards per game, 7.3 yards per pass, 40-14 touchdown interception ratio, and almost a 96 passer rating. That is a really good quarterback. That is a borderline top 10, top 12 quarterback in the NFL. So that's why Trevor Lawrence, I think, is the second best quarterback in this division until proven otherwise.
And I think a lot of that does make sense, and it hinges on the idea of whether you believe or not Trevor Lawrence is the tractor versus the trailer here.
Sure.
Like, and I think that's a big thing that they're going to place him now with this new contract, even though the contract does not kick in until another 2 years because he's still on that rookie deal and they have the fifth option, which is pretty crazy to me that they're tied to him for until about 2028. And then even so after that, and that's really where the money starts to
Need I remind our audience, Trevor Lawrence is younger than Will Levis. He is
Correct.
Younger than Will Levis. Will Levis is the oldest quarterback in this division.
Still, I do think that that's the crux of the argument, whether you think that with this team, this upcoming team this year, that we all have a lot of questions about how the Jacksonville Jaguars make their choices in building a team around Trevor Lawrence. Like, we're going to have to see that the tractor, which is that 16-7 Trevor Lawrence versus a trailer, the guy who, is maybe on that 10 to 12 range, but doesn't have the it factor, doesn't have that kind of clutch gene that puts you into that top 6 or 7 conversation. CJ Stroud in his first year, you can go back and you can look at, the last, there are 6 or 7 games for CJ Stroud last season that just make you say he really did do this by himself. You can look at kind of like the Cincinnati game where they were going up against Joe Burrow and he just had his hair on fire. I have trouble finding a lot of games, even when Trevor Lawrence is 16-7 that span. I have a lot of trouble finding games where Trevor Lawrence really proved to me that he carried this team on his back and showed a big reason why they got that win, right? You can look at that Jaguars team when he was 16-7 there on that 7-game win streak. You look at how well they were all playing together at the end of that season. And then even so, you count the playoffs, but then again, if the Chargers don't actually end up blowing that 4 interception game by Trevor Lawrence in the playoffs, how are we really talking about Trevor Lawrence? I think that's the biggest thing for me, is that he just hasn't shown me that star power capability that top 10 quarterbacks need to have.
So I understand what you're saying. And if we're making it a conversation of, okay, which quarterbacks are tractors and which ones are trailers, in my opinion, he has at times been a tractor and at times been a trailer so far in his short career. And I think that he absolutely has the potential to be a bona fide tractor quarterback, the quarterback that you hit your wagon to as a team. They elevate everyone around them. You win because of them, not necessarily just with them. But I'm not saying he is 100% there yet. I see in the flashes, I see it, man. And I think Trevor is 1000% one of the best, if not the best right now in the league, litmus test for who's actually watching the games, who's actually going back and watching like the film and breaking down what exactly happened for these guys, and who's just box score scouting and checking out the Jaguars score on Red Zone. I think you can see that divide pretty clearly when this contract comes down and you see who is praising and who is detracting that decision. I'll say this. If you don't want to take my word for it, I think most of the people that we collectively agree should be respected in terms of NFL coverage are fans of Trevor Lawrence and fans of the work that he's done. I think that the most smartest people in this space are Trevor Lawrence believers. And I think it is more the loudmouth shock jock radio types that are Trevor Lawrence detractors. So a little bit of an appeal to authority there, but I think it's warranted because it is really that clear of a divide that I think it warrants mentioning. Okay, so we agree on Lawrence too. I think the other interesting thing here is the fact that we both have Will Levis above Anthony Richardson, despite the fact that I am, speaking of guys that I am on the record loving, I love Anthony Richardson. I think that he has a ton of potential, and I loved what I saw in a very limited capacity from him last year. But what was the reason for you, JT, why you went? What was it even a consideration for you? Did you have to sit and think about who you put 3 and who you put 4?
I think not really. And the reason why is that what Tim Lee in the comments here brings up. He says AR should be an NA ranking. Any conversation about how good he is based off 10 passes in the NFL is nonsense. And I think that's the big reason of why I put him 4th.
10 passes is funny, but yes, I get it.
I think there's no question that we think from a talent perspective, we both had Anthony Richardson higher than Will Levis coming out. And I think even last year, we still believed while they were playing that Anthony Richardson was the more impressive talent and can be the more impressive talent over Will Levis because he just has such a big skill set of things that he can do super well that Will Levis just physically cannot do.
He's slightly better at a number of things. Like he's got a
Yes.
slightly stronger armor. He's a slightly
However,
better
yeah.
runner. All these things. Yeah.
However, the best ability is availability in the NFL, right? And if we are I can't sit here and put Anthony Richardson higher than 4.
Anyways,
I can't put him higher than 4 because there is a real reality where he goes off and this season takes off running and then gets hurt immediately again. Like until we start to see some consistency with Anthony Richardson, it's hard for me to put him anywhere above these 3 quarterbacks who have, for the most part, I know Will Levis has only like played double the amount of games as Anthony Richardson and did get hurt, but still he did have more of that consistent availability.
Yeah, I would actually argue for both of them to be more NA candidates than actually ranked candidates here. So if if I'm arguing that for Will, I'm definitely arguing that for Anthony. I'm with you on that. I think it's really just the amount of football we've seen. They're both, I would argue, more unknowns than they are knowns at this point. Both are, it's a projection. It's based on the flashes we saw in limited capacity. But if you have to rank them, which we did in this exercise, you go with Will because you have, albeit limited, a significantly less limited sample size than you have with Richardson, where it's literally so like it is so
double the sample size between these.
It's not more. I mean, it feels like, because Richardson played like 4 games, but he missed at least half of 2 of them or something. So I think he in total
like 3.5
like
versus like
games.
8. Yeah.
No, I think it was like 2.5. I think people are forgetting how little of one of those games he left early in the first half with a concussion, and the other one he left with the shoulder thing at some point midway through. So yeah. Anyways, I'm with you. I think that list in particular, the quarterback ranking, could look dramatically different one calendar year from now. If we re-up this exercise and do this again next mid-June, it could be flipped on its head. I'll be shocked if Stroud is 4th. But other than that, I think you could argue 2, 3, 4. Completely different. And I think all 3 of the guys, frankly, in the 2, 3, and 4 position have the capacity to at least make that number 1 spot interesting. It would take Stroud coming back to earth a little bit, and it would take those guys really reaching their potential. But I could see that happening. Let's move on to some. Last thing. Backup quarterback ranking. We don't have to argue about it, but
so like backup quarterback rankings, and there's also some comments that we should get to as well on the quarterback subject.
So the starting quarterbacks, it's Houston, Jacksonville, Tennessee, Indy for me and you. For backups, and the backups are Joe Flacco, Mason Rudolph, Mac Jones, and who the heck is Davis Mills, our boy, Mr. Longneck. So my ranking of those guys is Indy, Tennessee, Houston, Jacksonville. I would take.
Wow.
Yeah,
really?
Mac Jones, bottom of he's broken. We saw it last year. I mean, this is a man who was benched multiple. He was benched multiple times for Bailey Zappi, a guy that barely hung on to the Patriots roster when he wasn't the starting quarterback over Mac Jones, whose butt was on the bench because he sucks. Like he is Kenny Pickett, but not as far down the line as Kenny Pickett. Like he is Kenny Pickett 6 months in advance of his timeline, where it's falling apart. He's broken mentally, physically. He's so mediocre. Mac Jones, the most interesting thing he's going to do all year long is that funny drill that he did in camp a couple weeks ago, where he's running and like doing a backflip onto the pad and like running through guys, playing running back and looking goofy. He sucks. He's bad. He's a bad quarterback. Sorry.
That's crazy to me. I do think that is.
And I am not a big
crazy.
Davis Mills fan, but
No, you are not. However, 2 things with your list. One, it's very funny that you would think Joe Flacco is the backup quarterback, when Keaton Slovis is there, looking young and hungry for that
is
spot.
That your pick for the backup in Indy?
No. We're
talking about an elite quarterback, Super Bowl MVP, Joe Flacco. How dare you? How dare you?
I would rank it personally. I would go Mason Rudolph with the Titans. I would take 1
over Joe.
Yeah.
Joe got to the playoffs last year.
He did, but are we expecting him to do that again?
16 touchdowns in 3 games. Joe was cooking. He was cooking.
I don't know if I'm going to
DeMar Hamlin in the comeback player of the year. He beat the guy that died on the field.
I question the success that he can have. I don't know if he can continue to do that.
You win 9 games with this team. You think Joe Flacco can't win more than that?
I don't know, man. I don't know. I mean, he's so old.
Joe Flacco slander on today's show.
Oh yeah.
Holy
Well,
cow.
hold on. It's about to get even worse for you because I'm putting Mac Jones number 2.
Then you guys, welcome into the Hot Read Podcast. This has been the Hot Read Podcast. It's over. JT, turn it off. We're done. I'm going home.
I'm putting Mac Jones.
That is the single dumbest thing you have ever said to me on this show. That is so stupid.
I'm questioning the longevity of Joe Flacco. Like he was.
So now it's the next 5 years. Is that exercise now?
I don't know, but like he was down and out. And yes, did he have an insane run with a very well put together team? Yes. Do I think that he can do it again? Like if he had to, I don't know. With Mac Jones, I know what I'm getting to run the offense at way younger.
Garbage, unusable trash.
I don't know if that's true.
Have you seen Billy Zappi play football? Have you? Have you seen what the Patriots like? If you watched, I wouldn't blame you if you haven't. Have you watched much Patriots football the past couple of years?
I have, and it's enough for me to know that I don't think it was really the all the fault of Mac Jones.
Well, I'm not saying it was all. I mean, do you remember the London game last year in particular? This might be the moment in my mind where I'm like, okay, this stuck. Mac is dead now. It was the play near the end. They were no, it wasn't London. It was Germany, right? I think they were playing the Colts. It was Patriots, Colts in Germany, if I'm not mistaken. Last September, October, and there was a play in the in the red zone. Patriots gunning to score here. Mac Jones throws what's supposed to be just a pretty simple lob pass to a tight end for a touchdown that ends up being intercepted and ends the game. And it is the biggest. I mean, like the arm strength completely non-existent. The ball didn't spiral. I mean, it was. I've seen toddlers throw better footballs than what he tried to throw, and it was like he was on the move a little bit, but it took the most minimal, marginal athletic ability, and he just didn't have it. The dude is he's trash. He's washed. I would rather Desmond Ridder be my backup quarterback than Mac Jones right now. That's how bad I think Mac Jones. I would rather anybody almost. Like Marcus Mariota, rather him as my backup than Mac Jones right now. And I hate Marcus. I think he stinks at football. But Mac blows. And I'm not going to wish this because I don't want Trevor to get hurt because that's just going to make things muddier. But if we ever see Mac Jones this year, I'm going to have my eyeballs glued to my television set to watch your boy. He's now your boy, by the way.
Okay.
JT, big fan of Mac Jones.
Fine. Listen,
you want to defend yourself. I know I'm suffocating you because I'm just in awe. I'm sorry. You can continue.
Listen, there's something to be said that I don't know why we are thinking that Joe Flacco is now one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time because he was put into a situation just absolutely cookie cutter made for him. Like one of the best offensive lines last year, a really talented wide receiver core. Like I'm not saying that he couldn't do it again because you look at what the Indianapolis Colts have now, and I do think that they have probably better weapons. Their offensive line is comparable on a good day.
Same neighborhood.
Right? Yeah, but that's just it's a wildly different offense that Shane Steichen is going to throw at you versus what the Browns are going to roll out any given day. And now I understand that they changed.
It's a better one. And sorry, Stoney, close your ears in the comments. Like your boy Kevin Stefanski, I think he's good at what he does, but I'd take Steichen as far as an offensive play caller.
It's a lot of just not looking at the context of who Joe Flacco has been over the last 7 to 8 years with the Denver Broncos and the Jets and only remembering what he did in those 7 games. And I think that if you can tell me that he's going to do that again and stay at that level of consistency, I maybe am with you. But the Jaguars now have a very cheap and young backup quarterback who I think thrown into that game or thrown into a game with that system and the things around him, I am pretty confident in him to be able to execute an offense.
All right.
And then I have Davis Mills last. So
Super Bowl MVP, comeback player of the year. Let his team do a playoffs last year. I think he threw 37
years
touchdowns
ago
in
or
5
something.
games. I think 37 touchdowns in 5 games, I think.
Oh my God.
Anyways,
real quick,
it's an interesting point on your part.
Before we move on, there's a couple comments we need to get to here about the quarterback discussion before we can move on. Sonny says Trevor Lawrence about to take the baton from Kirk Cousins as the measuring stick for mediocre quarterbacks. I don't think so, but all right. On the matter.
That's the floor.
Yeah, Tim Lee says T-Law is like a house in Green Hills. Even if it's a mid house, all of the other houses sold for 10 million, and he just happened to sell most recently to justify his price based off the neighborhood, which is a very good take. I do
Okay.
enjoy that one.
I mean, I
He
don't
goes
know,
on,
but it's an interesting.
he goes on to say T-Law is exactly how I feel about Dak Prescott. Good enough to be a consistent NFL quarterback, but no idea if he's the problem or answer to win playoff games.
If we're gonna say Dak Prescott and Trevor, like that's the tier, that's where I'm at. That's where I think that's actually I would if you told me to rank Trevor Lawrence and Dak Prescott, there is no world in which I'm currently putting Trevor Lawrence over Dak Prescott. But for folks to be in the same breath in the comments saying I think he's pretty mid, I'd compare him to Dak Prescott. My brain is my head is spinning on my shoulders. I don't know what to make of that.
Interesting. And then anyways, King Jerry says that, by the way, it was 528 to 178 snaps.
So like 2.5, almost 3 times more. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot. Okay. Can we
move
on?
Now we can move on. We
can
move
on. There are 4
on
other position groups we have to get to. We're 40 minutes into this.
I don't think that I was going to get, I don't think I was going to get interrogated over a 40-year-old Joe Flacco in AFC South.
podcast. I can't wait for us to be done here today. Later this week, I can clip that and let the internet play jury and judge on.
Sure.
Right now.
I mean, we can move on. Okay. I'm not going to.
Let's move on. We do have other position groups. More interesting, frankly. I think we've kind of buried the lead. Let's do running back next, because this is another one we could argue about and people on the internet might get mad about. JT, I'll let you go first. Would you mind letting us know what your list is, first, second, third, and fourth for the running back position? This is where this is not just starters anymore. We're taking into consideration stables and depth.
Yeah, so I'm gonna put the Titans at number 1. I think the combo of Tony Pollard, Tyjae Spears, and then even going down the depth chart of maybe a Dylan Johnson, who kind of carried that Washington team on his back last year against some really good teams, and then also was a reception machine at Ole Miss or Mississippi State, Ole Miss, one of the two.
I think.
Either one. I think he has all the tools needed for a successful running back in the NFL, and then you can throw in Julius Chestnut if you'd like as well.
The nasty nut, of course. Yeah,
he has shown in the past some flashes. My number 2, and this one is a little bit interesting, but I'm going to go with the Indianapolis Colts because I think the star power of Jonathan Taylor may outweigh the depth questions that they may have.
Name the next running back on the Indianapolis Colts. I dare you.
It was Zach Moss. Is it? I have no idea.
I'm having to check right now. It is
Trey Sermon. Trey
Sermon and Evan Hull are the rounding out that group.
I don't think that they are, serviceable at replacement level at best at their ceiling, but
they're not Zach Moss,
the star power of a Jonathan Taylor, I think, outweighs the other two, which is at my third spot, Trevor Etienne. I think that I have the Jags there at 3 with Trevor Etienne and Tank Bigsby. I think
Travis
Etienne Jr.
Wrong Jaguar, understandable.
Yeah, both Jaguars. He's a guy that I think gets a little bit underrated for the versatility that he can bring at times to an offense. And then also as a Tank Bigsby lover, last season was
another crazy take.
Gut punch.
That's crazy.
Gut punch. However, I know that NFL.
So you admit that he ends up not being pretty good at football.
Oh yeah, he was not good last year. But I know
you're loving him coming in. I see.
You with Trevor, you know that the star power is in there. I know that the NFL's average NFL running back level of play is somewhere inside Tank Bigsby. And
is Tank Bigsby's ceiling like Gus Bus? Is that the?
I think so.
I think that's the ceiling, which is not super promising, but
I know it's in there.
Useful.
I know it's in there. I know
but they're gonna get that serviceable role player out of him. I see it. Yeah.
And then fourth, I have the Texans, not because I don't think Joe Mixon still has some left in the tank. It's just between him and I know that you are a absolute Damian Pierce truther, but I just think
that it's a gut punch and I will never die.
I just think they lack the versatility that these other 3 teams can bring in the running back department.
So my list is almost the same. I went, and I thought we might argue about this, but it seems like we're not going to. I had Tennessee, Indy, Houston, Jacksonville. So I swapped the last 2. We can have the discussion about Houston versus Jacksonville. There's a hard divide between groups I'm happy about and groups I'm not. I think Tennessee and Indy are in good place. They are above average running back rooms. And then Houston and Jacksonville, I am quite displeased with what we have cooking in those two roofs. I'm not. I think that they're missing dudes.
So are you like, is that a testament to you don't think that Travis Etienne can be a top 6-7 running back in the league, or is
so
that
of every
more
running
just
so of
like,
every running back on Houston and Jacksonville's roster, Etienne's clearly the best
okay,
at this point in time. But I don't love the way that they utilize him. First of all, now the whole Press Taylor calling plays in Jacksonville, will go back to Doug Peterson kind of thing. I wouldn't be opposed to seeing like, okay, Doug Peterson, he's going to do the plays this year, and they're maybe going to use him in a different way. Like, let's see it, because I think the talent is in there. I'm with you on ETN has the capacity to be a top 10, top 5 if everything goes right for, running back in the NFL, especially the modern NFL, because he, like you said, reception machine, very much a live element of the passing game. But Tank Bigsby, no. And didn't the Jaguars, they drafted somebody, right?
yeah, well,
they traded for Dearness Johnson. That's right.
Yes.
Dearness Johnson is now a Jacksonville Jaguar. He's currently, by the way, on our lads listed ahead of Tank Bigsby on the depth chart, which, speaking of a gut punch for you, I'm very sorry about that. Dearness Johnson, Mac Jones, same tier right there. Yeah, I think that they both are lacking. And then as for the Texans, I am a Pierce guy. Speaking of guys I think could be top 10 running backs in the league, if Pierce needs out of Houston, like clearly his skill set, they're wasting him down there. I swear they're wasting him. His skill set is not.
It's in there somewhere. A top 10 running back is in there somewhere.
His running style in college, it's not conducive to the way that the Texans are wanting to run the ball right now, which is fine. Like, it's just not a good match. He needs, put him in if you got him out to San Francisco, yes, I would love that. That'd be awesome. Make that trade happen. Now, of course, that's if Christian McCaffrey didn't exist. I don't know what there is to say about your boy, former Cincinnati Bengal Joe Mixon. He's what he is. I'd say he's like the 16th, 17th, 18th best running back in the league right now. He's older. He's got some juice left. Yeah. You trust him to get a job done. It's going to be fine. Is that fair?
Chef Ran in the comments asked, is Mixon overrated to y'all? I like him more than ETN. I think Mixon is perfectly rated to me. Like,
I do not like him more than ETN.
No. I do not like him more than ETN either. I think for me personally, Mixon is perfectly rated as a guy who, probably is in that back half of like 15-ish, 16th best running back. I mean, he's like 28 going on 29, still has some juice left in the tank, but he doesn't have the burst or the elusiveness that young Joe Mixon had. And so I think
if we're ranking individual running backs in the AFC South, I think it is Jonathan Taylor, Tyjae Spears, Tony Pollard.
It's hard for me to distinguish
Tyjae, and then
Tony
it's
Pollard
like ETN Pollard are right there. Is that what you're going to say?
Yeah, I mean, I would probably go, I'd probably go Jonathan Taylor, Tony Pollard
over Spears.
Well, I just don't think we've seen enough of like Spears as like every down running back.
I've seen all there is to see, brother. I've seen what I need to see.
I understand the flashes are there, but like I need the sample size.
Did you see Tony Pollard last year? Because I also saw Tony Pollard last year. And speaking of guys you're having to project a little bit on, I mean, if you're high on Pollard, it's not based on last year.
No, I think it's the versatility that he can bring and the fact that he, I've seen him do it. And it's to the point where I think that, once again, last year is last year. It was a down year, but obviously,
year after the injury,
it's the year after the injury, right? And so with him, it's like he has the two-way capability to also then play like a 3-down role. With Tyjae, it's just like I haven't seen it yet, but I know that like he can be up there at number 2 and like probably usurp like a Travis Etienne and a Tony Pollard. I just need to see it like work out, and then so that would be that, and then Etienne and Mixon as well Mixon's probably the last running back for me still out of all 5 of those guys.
Well, the reason if we just put these out on the internet for the entirety of sports fandom to dissect, we would be met with the initial complaint, hey, what, Tennessee over Indy? What are you talking about? They have Jonathan Taylor. If Jonathan Taylor had played as much football, like if If he'd played more than just half of the games in the last 2 seasons, I'd be inclined to say that star power is just like, it's like a Derrick Henry effect. If the Titans had Derrick Henry and literally you and me at the next 2 running back positions in terms of depth, I would still put the Titans at the top of the list just because of that, that gravitas. With Taylor, he's got the talent to be that, but he's not been on the field. Like, so that comes into play. And the fact that the Titans have, I think, 2 very good starting caliber running backs in Pollard and Spears, I think that gives him the edge. It's close. And, it's a testament to Taylor, him being second on this list, despite you and me believing the guys they have in the depth chart up there in Indy are literally the equivalent of you and me. Like, it is Taylor and nobody else at this point, unless you're a big Trey Sermon fan for some reason. Them being second, I think, is entirely Taylor. And if Taylor, plays 17 games this season, I won't be surprised one bit if he is clearly far and away the best running back in this division. It's just we've not seen that in a while.
And the fact that their second running back is technically their quarterback as well. Like, their second best running back isn't even actually a running back, and like they won't use their backup running backs, right? In that gadget style thing, they just have Anthony Richardson to do that. So I think that also plays a factor as to why they wouldn't be number 1 for me either.
All right, receiver time. Let's do some receivers in the AFC South. And before we get to that, if you're with us live, we appreciate you being here. If you're on YouTube and you're in the chat, thanks for being a part of today's conversation. It's been a fun one so far. Let us know your thoughts so far on the quarterbacks and the running backs and what you think about the wide receiver groups, because this is perhaps the juiciest conversation that we're going to get into today. Make sure you're liking and subscribing, all of those things. JT, I'll give you my list and you can give me yours and we can see where we want to go. I have it: Houston, Tennessee, Indy, Jacksonville.
So I'm pretty close. I've been teetering, like I said, I think we did this kind of ranking thing maybe like 3 months ago or so.
At some point,
like, for me, the Colts and the Titans are very razor thin to me. Like, they can flip flop any day. But it would be Houston. I would do Indianapolis second, very close.
That is not Tennessee, where I thought we'd have third to argue. Okay.
And then on my list here, I went Houston, I went Indianapolis, I went Tennessee, and then I made sure to put a designation. Like, you've seen the movie Shark Tale, right? With Will Smith, right?
Uh-huh.
It's like Houston, Indianapolis, Tennessee, whale poop, and then the Jacksonville Jaguars is where I put them. In my best Martin Scorsese impression, I guess, as Mr. Sykes. And then I put Jacksonville last because I question what they are ever doing and what they're trying to give Trevor Lawrence to cook with.
Yeah, it's Brian Thomas Jr., the rookie first-round pick out of LSU, Gabe Davis, who they traded for, Devin Duvernay, who they traded for, Tim Jones, Elijah Cook, Seth Williams,
Christian Kirk.
Oh, excuse me. I left an entire line out here on the R-Lads chart. It's Davis, Thomas Jr., Christian Kirk. Those 3 are your starters. And then it's Parker Washington, second-year player, Tim Jones, Devin Duvernay out of Baltimore. Yeah, it's bad. So we can kind of start from the bottom, work our way up. We agree Jacksonville is the bottom. They're the dregs. The opinion on this, I don't see a lot of room for it to change either. It's going to take Brian Thomas Jr. being awesome immediately. And then it's like, okay, well, they got an alpha. And, Gabe Davis and Christian Kirk both have proven to be serviceable number 2 types. So if you got an alpha and 2 twos, Trevor has a better year. That offense as a whole has a better year. You could, I think the opinion of them generally could rise, but I don't necessarily see that happening. Stoney's saying don't sleep on Josh Cephas in Jacksonville. Looks like a rookie. A number of rookies. Brevin Easton, another Easton in the league. Joseph Skates and Joshua Cephas. 3 rookies I did not do any. Just not I did no work on that prep.
Yeah. the depth for them versus the rest of these teams is another big thing of why they're number 4. Not only do they lack that proven number 1 on their team, but they just don't have the depth. Like, Parker Washington is a nice role player. Tim Jones is Tim Jones. Devin Duvernay has really never worked out in Baltimore.
Is Tim Jones.
He's a jag, man. He's just a guy. Like, and then after that, they really don't have anything else. So, I mean, like, you're relying heavily on your top 3 of Gabe Davis, Christian Kirk, and Brian Thomas Jr. And then when you have to rely, like, you can rely on Christian Kirk, that connection between him and Trevor Lawrence has been really, really nice, and it works very well for them. But they just
If he
lack
stays
that number
healthy,
one guy. Yeah.
if he stays on the field, right? Like that's what it is.
Mhm.
They all three of their starters have big question marks on them. They don't have any sure thing. And so that's why they're at the bottom there. Let's talk about this Jacksonville, or excuse me, this Houston, Tennessee, Indianapolis divide. For me, Indy was an easy third. And I was debating heavily over Houston and Tennessee. Sounds like you had Houston as an easy first and Tennessee and Indy as the toss up for 2 and 3. Explain to me why you think Indy is clearly, or not clearly, but why you lean Indy over Tennessee at the number 2 spot.
Yeah, I think this one, and this probably will make sense once I explain it. I looked at the wide receiver position more as like down the road, like these teams. How do their wide receiver rooms look for the foreseeable future?
Okay, so you're changing the exercise because that's not how he started it. It was this year, right?
And still,
because
like
I get what you're saying. They're younger. The Titans are old. I get that, but that's not the way I approach it.
There is even if you look at it in the kind of the here and now in 2024, I think that there is a pretty real argument that both of these can still be razor thin. Like Michael Pittman to me is a borderline top 10 wide receiver, and he kind of showed it last year. He is a guy that I think on the outside really showed his ability to make big plays for a team when they really needed it last season. Like he is one of the very few guys that like last season proved to me, like, if you need a first down, this guy is going to be able to get it for you. And I think that's something that like a young quarterback with Anthony Richardson really, really needs. Then you look at the depth. Josh Downs, I think I've always been high on Josh Downs. I think he has a really good chance to be one of the best slot receivers in the league this year, especially the way that Shane Steichen can scheme him up. And then it really just comes down to me that I think that AD Mitchell in that wide receiver 2 role has the ability in this offense to kind of explode right out of the gate, especially with how much he really feels like he's been, undervalued through this draft process and the way people have seemingly doubted his ability. I think that in this system,
for pretty good reasons, I would say.
I mean, yes, like there are a lot of things that in his game bring
He's
up
red flag city,
marks.
this guy.
He's red flag city, but there's a specific reason I think Shane Steichen went out and got him, because I think Shane Steichen is thinking to himself, I can fix this. Because
every coach thinks they can fix every guy.
I know, but I think that Shane Steichen can fix AD Mitchell, and it's why I think
I'm not
they
saying
have
I
one
don't
of the
think
youngest.
so, but I am saying that's a big projection. It's a big projection.
I think that they have the ability this season to have one of the sneaky best wide receiver like rooms in the entire league.
I see the upside. I do. I see the upside. But I don't agree with the like when I approach the rankings here. It's a guy being a sure thing, knowing the known quantities on the roster matter a lot. And you obviously have to take into account the projection with guys like AD Mitchell, like Brian Thomas Jr. Those guys have the potential to blow up and change the math, but they are projections. There's an inherent risk there, especially in their rookie year. And I just don't think let me ask it to you this way. If we just swapped the teams and I told you the Titans no longer have DeAndre Hopkins, they no longer have Calvin Ridley, they no longer have Treylon Burks, they no longer have Tyler Boyd. Now they have the Colts receivers. They have Pittman and Downs and Pierce and AD Mitchell. Are you feeling better about the Titans wide receiver situation around Levis than you currently are? I'm suddenly feeling slightly worse about it because I don't know what I have. I'm like, well, I think the Titans offense with Levis and these receivers has the potential. They have the potential to be really good. Like, I need to see it from AD. You say Pittman, you think is a fringe top 10 receiver. I think he's a fringe number 1 receiver. I'm not certain. I think he is either on the lowest level of number 1 receivers in the league or the best number 2. I think if you got him into a situation where he could be a number 2, he'd be unbelievable. He'd be of immense value. So I think when I look at it that way and flip the receivers and on the other side of the coin, okay, now Richardson has D-Hop and Ridley and Boyd. Oh, I'm like, if he can stay healthy, he's going to explode this season. I have no doubt because he's got guys around him that we know exactly what they are. Yes, they're older. Yes, they're veteran. They may not be a help much longer beyond this year. But boy, this year, I have no doubt about the guys that are at his disposal.
And that's where I think I also kind of disagree as well, because that idea that you know what you have in these very aging receivers, like to the point
You do. We saw
but
it.
you don't. But the cliff
We've seen
comes for all wide receivers. This is the same question they had about Cooper Kupp last year. Like he into his 30th his 30 season. Like the questions were, is he going to be able to continue doing what Cooper Kupp does? And for better or for worse, it kind of turned out that cliff came for him last year. Now
Okay,
we're
but
kind
that
of
wasn't that. I would argue that's not true, because when I think about the cliff, I think about a guy is healthy and he just doesn't have the gear anymore. You know, like he's out there, he's healthy, and he's just physically, you know, it's just he doesn't have the top speed, doesn't have the agility. He's old, he's rickety, he's achy. When I think about the last year that Kupp had, it was because dude's hamstrings don't work anymore. Like he's got significant injuries he's dealing with and playing through. I think that's different. And if you're arguing that the cliff is going to come and suddenly D-Hop's just not going to have the hands that he has, he's suddenly not going to be fast enough to separate or sit down in a soft zone. You think Calvin Ridley's slow all of a sudden when you yourself have reminded me many times that the guy's actually 25 years old. I don't know.
The big thing for me is that like I said, it's not that I think that the Colts are far and away the better. It's razor thin, and like with the depth that Tennessee had, I thought about maybe flip-flopping it. Like it's a very close decision for me. I don't really see that difference, that if you were to switch the teams, like it really is scheme dependent, I think, with what Shane Steichen wants to do up there. And I think that those receivers that he does have now are a perfect match for what they do, that it's going to elevate both themselves and Anthony Richardson. With DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley and Tyler Boyd, these are guys that, you don't really have to scheme up. They just have the talent and the ability, but they are on the older side, which means you have to start thinking about the availability and the wear and tear. Like if you told me that they were all three going to stay healthy the entire season, I don't know if that's exactly, like, if you told me that was going to happen, I would probably agree with you and say that they were two. However, we've had this conversation ourselves. Who is going to be there? We expect, Treylon Burks now to be in this wide receiver 4 role. We're most likely assuming that one of these three guys is going to go down in the middle of the season. Can he elevate himself to fill into
the most
that
likely
role?
is strong about most likely. I think there's a reasonable chance that somebody goes down. I'm not going to say for sure somebody's going to die. Do you walk into nursing homes on a regular basis and be like, in this room, somebody won't be here tomorrow? Is that what you do, you sicko?
I do not, but
apparently you do. You just did it with the Titans.
I think the availability of those guys is a big question to me as to why I think in this season upcoming, if we were to see kind of a drop off where Calvin Ridley is missing 1 or 2 games, where DeAndre Hopkins is missing 1 or 2 games, if these guys, Tyler Boyd, has every season we've seen his production go down and down, like on the decline. Not saying that he can still not play the slot position really well, but he had just about 700 yards the last season, which I think is on probably the end of his career. Like this is what you're going to get as his new ceiling, right? And so with all of that considered, the availability of a Michael Pittman and Josh Downs to be available, to be young and have that juice, I think is why I gave them the edge.
All right, remind me not to take you to visit my grandparents. All right. The last thing on this conversation, then we can move on. The Texans, we both have one. For me,
I don't think that's a discussion though. The fact,
I think it is. I sat and thought long and hard about putting Tennessee 1, Houston 2, and it all hinges on one man. It is Stephon Diggs. If Stephon Diggs is who he was at the beginning of last year, and like speaking of a guy that the cliff could come for, because he's turning 33 this year, sneaky old Stephon Diggs. If he's the guy that going into last year we believed him to be, the alpha, the one up in Buffalo, then I think that they are the number 1 group. But if he is what we saw the last 6-7 games of the year, where it's just, where's Stephon Diggs? He's disappeared. He's gone. He's not got it anymore. Then they're down to, you look at their depth chart, you take Diggs out, it's Nico Collins, who I think is clearly the number one receiver there. And then Tank Dell, Noah Brown, Ben Skoranek, John Mechie. It's not the
Robert
deepest.
Woods.
Titans legend Robert Wood.
I would disagree that it is not. It's a pretty deep room. I mean, you have a lot of guys.
You get super excited about Noah Brown.
Yes. Did you see him play in that role last season for
like 500 yards, 600 yards?
He was a monster when he was able to step out.
Like, he's a role player.
He's
an NWI type. NWI.
He's so much better than NWI.
He's an NWI tier.
Crazy.
Noah Brown.
Crazy.
Noah Brown, Ben Skoranek, John Mechie. They're all in that Traylon Burks, NWI, good years.
If you're that feels like you're not giving them enough credit. That depth.
Well, okay, but can I argue that Noah Brown is elevated by his quarterback? Where was the Noah Brown hype last year? 2 years ago, 3 years ago, before CJ Stroud existed? Noah Brown, what was he up to?
He was with Dak Prescott being their solid number 3 role player. Like,
that's right. Yeah, that's right. That's right. But not a super notable one. Not a super notable one.
Okay.
Not a super notable one.
I think the thing you do bring
up an Titans wide receiver room could finish this year easily the best receiver group in the division. I think they have the capacity to do that.
They do if they stay healthy and they continue to play at the level that they've played in the past. Like, however, I think the question with Stephon Diggs is a little bit different.
The exact same question.
But it's because he's not exactly going to be that wide receiver 1 role. Like, he's not going to play the same exact role that he did in Buffalo.
Either Calvin Ridley or DeAndre Hopkins is going to get to play it too, and they didn't get to do that last year either.
I mean,
so you're saying, well, Stephon Diggs, I'm raising his stock because he gets to be the number 2. Well, either Calvin Ridley or DeAndre Hopkins is also going to have that opportunity, and neither one of them did neither one of them has ever been the 2. Yeah, that's a lie. Recently has not been the 2. Take that out. Take that
out. We're taking it out in post. No,
yeah.
I think Calvin Ridley very much. There's a debate to be had last year that he was not the number 1 receiver for Trevor Lawrence. Like, Christian Kirk in a lot of those games was easily the number 1 for the most part of the season.
A game or two. I mean, were these the games where Trevor is throwing the ball?
Go back and look.
Trevor Lawrence throwing the ball a tick late, and Calvin Ridley's making a touchdown catch that would have counted in college, but not in the NFL because he can't get both feet in bounds. But how many yards did Christian?
I mean,
Christian
go
Kirk
back
had,
when we
Christian
were
Kirk
talking.
had 800 yards last year. Christian Kirk was closer to Traylon Burks' production last year than he was to a Calvin Ridley type.
He also didn't play the entire season. He was out for the last.
And that doesn't count for anything.
Weeks.
That doesn't count for anything. He can't stay healthy.
I mean, what did Calvin Ridley then do when Christian Kirk was down? Oh, it's like all of a sudden erupted. Like,
all right. Well,
I think Calvin Ridley
that I win this debate, so I think we can move on.
That's fine.
Yeah, I'm not trying to cut you. If you have any more thoughts, but we do have 2 other position groups to get to here.
And that's why I think it's the crux of all of this to say that the AFC South all of a sudden has a lot of very interesting wide receiver room cores that go well with these young quarterbacks. Like, I think it's a very easy debate that this entire list could flip on its head. Like, if there is a Brian Thomas Jr. proves all the doubters wrong, that it wasn't just because he was the 2 on LSU with Jaden Daniels. Like, this dude can be that X factor 1. Like, we could be talking about this totally different in an entire year.
AFC South tight ends, JT. Let's talk about some tight ends. Give me your list ranking the teams based on their tight end room.
All right, so I had the Texans, then the Titans, then the Jaguars, and then the Colts.
All right. My list is obviously Jacksonville, number 1.
We're giving Butterfinger Evan Ingram
obviously
the absolute credit over Dalton Schultz.
Evan Ingram, one of
tight
ends last year who even sniffed 1,000-yard receiving season. Tight end Evan Ingram, very good tight end, obviously number 1. So Jacksonville and Houston, then Tennessee, then Indy. So once again, we agree on the worst team. We're very good on agreeing who sucks the most, and that's the Colts. Now you could really anytime in the last 20 years, you could go year by year. So let's talk 2013, rank these position groups. Indy is still number 4. Indianapolis, they have never, ever, ever been a team notorious for their tight ends. It's just not been their game. Jelani Woods still trying to cook down there, hoping he's
the
going to
king
pop.
of 10 RAS score
I
for
know,
all of
crazy
their tight
athlete
ends.
Jelani Woods, eye candy in the combine. Jelani Woods.
Is Mo Alley Cox still kicking it for
Yeah,
them?
he's still kicking. Kylan Granson still kicking.
Mm.
Will Mallory, Eric Tomlinson, Drew Ogletree, Jordan Murray. That's their group down there. It's super mid. It's super mid. Jacksonville. So here's the deal. Again, I don't know this for sure, but I'm just guessing. You can count on one hand the number of tight ends in the NFL last year who had 1,000 yards or even got close to 1,000 yards. Evan Ingram was amongst them. Evan Ingram, besides Calvin Ridley, you take Calvin Ridley off that team, he was the most productive receiver on the Jacksonville Jaguars. 963 yards, 8.4 yards per reception, had 4 touchdowns, 100, the most targets on the entire team, 143 targets. The guy, he's clearly the best tight end in the entire division. I don't think there's any argument. He is the best. Do you think that Dalton Schultz is a better tight end than Evan Ingram?
He's been a more consistent and better tight end for longer than Evan Ingram was. I mean,
that's not the question. That's not the question. That's not the question. Last year, he was the better tight end.
I think Evan Ingram is probably the better tight end, but once again,
we're
looking at the entire room for them. Like Dalton Schultz, the role that he plays.
How old is Dalton Schultz? He's getting up there, isn't he? Gotta be.
I think he's 29.
Really?
I think so. He's 27.
I'm so sorry for making you old, Dalton. So that's crazy. I feel like he's been in the league for 7 years. So, all right.
I think that Dalton Schultz is literally the epitome of a solid tight end. Like he's
average, super average. I agree.
I
and
think
Evan Ingram is well above average.
He's sniffing that top 6-7 conversation for Dalton Schultz.
Tight ends in the league?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
I can name 10 tight ends better than him easily.
Maybe I can't.
Okay,
I don't know.
All right,
That's true.
You've got Kittle, you've got Hawkinson, you've got Andrews, you got Kelsey,
Andrews.
You've got Evan Ingram, you've got yes. I'm going team by team in my head. Okay, it starts to get tricky. Let me look up a list. Let me just. I need a word bank.
The point there is that every single year we see solid production and consistency from Dalton Schultz and
Dallas Goedert.
I think they're on the same.
Better. Kyle Pitts.
I think they're on the same.
You taking Dalton Schultz over Kyle Pitts? I'm not.
Yes.
Nope.
Anyways,
Zach Ertz, a little washed.
I think I would say that Dalton Schultz and Dallas Goedert are like on the same tier for me. Like if you just go back through his career, like the way that Dalton Schultz has produced consistently year in and year out on all of his teams and been an X factor, is something that I think it doesn't go. It doesn't really.
I'm forgetting all the young guys. Dalton Kincaid, definitely a better tight end than Dalton Schultz. Sam Laporta, definitely a better tight end. Trey McBride, it's a projection. I'll grant you that, but he's going to be a better tight end than Dalton Schultz. David Njoku is absolutely a better tight end than Dalton Schultz. I've named at least 10 guys here. He is not a top 10 tight end in the league. He's like 12 at best.
And then once again, we just see him every year, like sniff into that top tight end conversation. Like he consistently.
No, he doesn't. I don't know what conversations you're in. You need new friend groups. This is the wrong conversation. I don't know what to tell you.
All this to say, like, I mean, just taking the whole room into account here. Like the Texans have Dalton Schultz, Brevin Jordan, who has been a solid role player for them ever since he came into the league. Cade Stover is a rookie there who is a fine 3, I think, for them. And then you look at, Jacksonville, once again, like they have Evan Ingram, but after that, we use the 2nd round pick on Brenton Strange and Luke Farrell. Like Luke Farrell is their
pick in recent memory.
It's so like they just have no
top
depth
50 player,
whatsoever.
Brenton Strange.
Still, I would put the athletic ability and the versatility that I guess when you talk about Tennessee, it's once again still a projection for them, but like the yards after catch ability for Chigakonkwo, the projection that the kind of role that Josh Wiley is going to take in his 2nd year here, like the depth there, I think is a lot better than what Jacksonville has, in my opinion.
Depth wise, yes. Like it is totally a stars and scrubs model for the Jaguars from a tight end perspective. So that's why I have them one. Like you take Evan Ingram off that team, and if you swapped Evan Ingram and Dalton Schultz, then the Jacksonville Jaguars are suddenly in contention. Like they're still probably above Indy because it's just that bad, but they're in contention with Indy for the 4th spot in the division.
That's so
Yes.
crazy to me.
Yes.
If you think
I wouldn't put them there. I'd still have Indy last, but I'd be like, yeah, it's these two teams.
That's crazy.
Bad tight end situation.
That's crazy to me.
Okay. All right. Well, we can move on. I don't know what to say. So you have Houston, Tennessee, Jacksonville, Indy. I have Jacksonville, Houston, Tennessee, Indy. Not exactly the same groups, but we've got one more position group to go to. And we, if you took the over on whatever the time was set at today, you have hit. Congratulations. I didn't expect us to get into this much of an argument. It's turned into the first take around here. Stoney in the comments saying, "Whoa, Eastn lost on the Njoku sauce." Or do you disagree? You don't like David Njoku, Stoney? Elaborate. Offensive lines. Let's talk about the offensive lines in the NFL, in specifically the AFC South. That is a division in the NFL. A little bit tougher of an exercise just because you got to make sure you're familiar with all of these players. And we don't quite know who is a starter at every position on every team yet. A lot of these things are ironed out in the wash in the next 2 months. But based on projected starters and based on what we know for the past year, here's my list, JT, and let me know how it compares to yours. I have Indy as the clear number 1 offensive line in this division. Do we at least agree upon that?
Yes, I think for better or for worse, even though they did have some downtime, just top to bottom from their center play and Ryan Kelly to the guard and tackle situation, they have the deepest and probably the best offensive line room out of anybody here.
Which is frankly demonstrative of just how quickly these things can change. Because if we'd done this episode last offseason, after the 2023 season that group had, largely the same group, we'd be like, it's them and Tennessee, 2 worst offensive lines in the division. They're both really, really bad. And that group really turned it around. So it's, kind of maybe a canary in the coal mine for Titans fans saying, a really bad group can turn into a really good group if you get the right coaching and give them some time to develop. So I have Indy 1, then Jacksonville, then Houston, then Tennessee. I will admit that 2, 3, 4, Jacksonville, Houston, Tennessee, the waters are kind of muddy. It's difficult. Tennessee 4th for me is largely I just need them to prove it to me. There's a lot of projection. It's a ton of projection, and it would not shock me at all if Tennessee ends up with the 2nd best offensive line at the end of the year in this division. But I just, it's a prove it thing for me. So what is your list? For me, it's Indy, Jacksonville, Houston, Tennessee.
So for mine, I had Indianapolis, and then I had the Texans, who I think when you gave the most money to Laramie Tunsil.
Interesting.
They moved Juice Scruggs to the center position, and I think that he's done really good. Kenyon Green finally kind of showed up and when he moved to guard. He showed the flashes that he can produce at the next level.
For the first time in 2 years, he sort of flashed, yes.
Listen,
I wouldn't consider it super hopeful.
But I think they have one of the most consistent solid lines now going forward for CJ Stroud.
Who's their right tackle?
George Fant played really damn good last year for them.
Is he still on the team?
I think so.
No, he's not. Wait. Well, yeah, right now their projected starter at right tackle is Titus Howard or Charlie.
I forgot they did have Blake Fisher as well. So maybe I don't know about the right tackle situation. However, I think that the solid core of their line is pretty consistent for them going forward, and kind of showed that last year with protecting CJ Stroud. And then this is where it might get a little contentious, but I do have the Titans at 3 and the Jacksonville Jaguars at 4, mostly because I am just absolutely like an Anton Harrison hater. I'm an Ezra Cleveland hater. Like all those guys, I did like the one thing that the Jacksonville does not have is like a stalwart anchor star on the offensive line.
Mitch Morse, Brandon Scherf, not a fan.
Washed up veteran Mitch Morse. Like, what are we doing? Like, I did put Tennessee.
Buffalo wanted him back bad. I have sources that indicate that they really wanted him back.
Yeah, That's why they cut him. Yeah, for sure.
Right.
That's exactly what happened.
Purely a cap casualty. Just a money thing.
Yeah. I put the Titans at 3 because I'm gonna shoehorn it in, the Bill Callahan factor. Makes that
I'm not mad at that. I'm not mad at it. I think you can respect me as a longtime suffering Titans fan. It's like prove it before I
Yeah,
give you
for
any
sure.
kind of. So, but I get it. I get it.
But that left side of the line with J.C. Latham, Peter Skoronski, and Lloyd Cushenberry, like it's like definitely when I went like position by position, and so when I did that, I had Indianapolis for the most part all three, but like for the center position, I think the Titans have the second best center. The guard position, I think that they are 2 or 3, and then tackle with what Bill Callahan and J.C. Latham have going on there, like, and the potential for J.C. Latham to be a star, I probably have him at like 3, and that for me was just enough to put it over the edge. That I mean, the Jacksonville is solid, but once again, it's just like they don't have a real stud on that line.
Stoney thinks the Jaguars have the best line in the division. That's
crazy.
Crazy. I mean, I put them at 2, but I don't them over the Colts is correct. So the reason I have the Colts 1, and I think you do too, is that they're the only line in this division where they don't really have any holes. There are some players that leave something to be desired, but they are at least there's a floor there that you can work with. Stoney Keeley, not an Anton Harrison hater. Clearly not, because you think he's awesome. I'm also not an Anton Harrison hater. I think that there's a pretty firm ceiling on him. He's never going to be a star that you build around, but he's a serviceable star. So I have Indy first because I don't see any big holes. I have Jacksonville 2 because I don't really see any flashing red lights. Like, I think left to right, all 5 positions, you got a guy that can work. You mentioned washed up veteran Mitch Morris, yes, at center there, you may the brains. I'm not worried about that connection with Trevor and like quarterbacking the group. He may get run over because he's old and weaker and not as good, and there's a reason he got cut. Fair. I think Brandon Scherf absolutely still has it. I think Ezra Cleveland is a serviceable guard. In their 2 tackles in Cam Robinson and Anton Harrison. So is Robinson or Little going to start? It's Robinson, correct? I think it's Robinson.
I believe so.
Starter. Yeah. So
Stoney does bring up a good point that with all 3 of these teams, they're a tackle injury away from pure disaster.
And the Titans aren't. And the Titans aren't. Whoa. How do you say those 3 teams?
The Titans weren't in that. Oh, I thought I said the Titans. No, I
know. How does he not? How do you not?
J.C. Latham going down. Like if J.C. Latham, God
it's
forbid,
over. It's a wrap. If J.C.
Latham,
God forbid, tears his ACL in September, it's a wrap. It's over. So it's all of them are, but like to a larger NFL point. How many teams in the NFL aren't their best tackle injury away from disaster? It's not many of them. And that's just the nature of the league. I get what Stoney is saying, but I don't see any of these teams. Like, I don't think any of these guys, you know what? Stoney, you've changed my mind. If J.C. Latham goes down, they just kick Skoronski out to tackle. Good point. Titans #1 line in the division. That's a wrap. I think that's easy. Yeah, I don't know. Any other big points you want to hit on with this line, or are we kind of done here?
I think that's
we can end on Skoronski as a tackle. I think it's a good place to stop. This was way more fun of an episode than I thought it was going to be. I hope that people. I think we did a good job of arguing and making entertaining words, but we may listen back to this and realize it's just like blah, 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 just screaming at each other like the like caveman yelling.
Listen,
I hope that's not what it was.
As soon as you started absolutely just pounding the table for Joe Flacco, I think all bets were off for everything, man.
Well, I had fun. JT, I imagine you have fun. I hope those of you that listened had more fun. But yeah, that was a good time. Guess what? We're going to run it back for better or for worse. We're going to be running it back on Thursday with the defensive side of the ball. So we hope to see you guys there. This has been a long episode, so we'll wrap it up. We hope that you are liking and subscribing. Hope that you are retweeting and reposting, being a friend by telling a friend about the show, making sure that you're following us on social media at Hot Read Pod on TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram. Again, we'll be back on Thursday with the defensive side of the ball, ranking AFC South teams by position group. And then next week, I'm leaving on Friday. I'm going to Maine on vacation, but I am bringing a computer and a microphone. We'll be doing shows from there. We'll figure out what they are then. Until then, for producer JT, I'm your host, Houston Freeze. Be back here on Thursday at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. This has been the Hot Read Podcast.